"Could you dance with me now? My ex is watching," Allison Ward whispered to the tall stranger in the tailored tuxedo, her emerald gown shimmering under the crystal chandeliers of Philadelphia's most prestigious annual gala. Her heartbeat quickened as she gestured discreetly toward a smug-looking man across the ballroom, who hadn't stopped staring since she arrived. The stranger's piercing gray eyes studied her face for a moment, before his lips curved into an amused half-smile that transformed his severe features. "Running from something, are we?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth like aged bourbon, as he extended his hand with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to command. Allison swallowed hard, placing her trembling fingers in his much larger palm, unprepared for the electric current that shot up her arm at the contact. Her plan had been simple: use this intimidating but handsome man as a shield against Bradley's unwanted attention, then disappear back into her quiet life. The orchestra began a new waltz as he pulled her effortlessly into his arms, one hand resting possessively at the small of her back, guiding her with surprising grace for a man of his imposing stature. "I'm Nico," he offered, his breath warm against her ear, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine despite the crowded ballroom's heat. "Allison," she replied, forcing herself to remember why she was at this ridiculous fundraiser in the first place. A mandatory appearance to schmooze with potential donors for her underfunded kindergarten program. Not to get tangled up with mysterious men who exuded danger from every pore. The crowd seemed to part unconsciously as Nico led her across the dance floor, and Allison couldn't help noticing the respectful nods directed their way, the whispered conversations that followed in their wake. It was as though everyone in Philadelphia's elite social circle recognized him. Everyone except her. Bradley's face had transformed from smug to pale with shock, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips as he watched them dance. His reaction seemed extreme for simple jealousy over a 6-month relationship that had ended badly. As the music crescendoed, Nico spun her expertly, his movements controlled and precise, before drawing her closer than strictly appropriate for two strangers. "Your ex seems more terrified than jealous," he observed with dark amusement, his eyes never leaving her face despite the curious glances from all directions. When the music ended, Allison stepped back, flustered by the intensity of his gaze and the strange reactions they'd provoked throughout the room. "Thank you for the rescue, but I should really go mingle with some of the school's donors," she said, attempting to regain her composure. Nico released her reluctantly, but not before pressing a business card into her palm, his fingers lingering against her skin. "When you're ready to know why your ex looks like he'd seen a ghost, call me," he said, with quiet authority that left no room for argument. Allison slipped the simple black card into her clutch without looking at it, unsettled by the cryptic message and the way her body had responded to this stranger. She needed air, perspective, and distance from whatever magnetic force Nico exuded. Hours later, as the gala wound down, Allison gathered her wrap and purse from the coat check, eager to trade her painful heels for the comfort of her small apartment and a cup of hot tea. The encounter with Nico had left her oddly unsettled, yet she couldn't stop replaying their dance in her mind. She stepped out into the cool Philadelphia night, digging through her purse for her car keys, when a sleek black Bentley pulled alongside the curb. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing Nico's enigmatic face, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "The man you were hiding from, he's dangerous," Nico stated flatly, nodding toward the parking garage where Bradley was indeed waiting beside Allison's modest sedan. "Get in, Ms. Ward. Philadelphia isn't safe for you tonight." Allison froze, her teacher's intuition screaming warnings while her body urged her toward the luxury car and its mysterious owner. "How do you know my last name?" "Who are you?" she demanded, clutching her purse like a shield against the mounting fear. Nico Falcone, a name that sent shivers through Philadelphia's underworld but meant nothing to kindergarten teacher Allison Ward, stepped out of the Bentley, his movement fluid despite his imposing frame. "I know many things, including that Bradley Porter works for people who want me dead," he stated calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than assassination attempts. His driver, a mountain of a man with watchful eyes, emerged from the front seat to stand guard while two more suits materialized from a second vehicle, effectively blocking Bradley's approach. The quiet display of coordinated power made Allison's knees weaken with belated realization. "You're not just some businessman," she whispered, memories of news headlines and whispered rumors about Philadelphia's notorious crime family suddenly connecting with the man before her. The respectful nods, the fearful glances. Everything made terrible sense now. Nico's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, perhaps regret at her discovery, or merely calculation of how to proceed. "No, I'm not. And now you've been seen dancing with me, which makes you a target or an asset in their eyes." Allison's mind raced through her options, each worse than the last as she glanced between Bradley's now retreating figure and the dangerous man standing before her. Her simple life of finger paintings and alphabet songs felt galaxies away from this moment. "I can't just leave with you. I don't know you," she protested weakly, even as she recognized the futility of her position. Bradley had clearly been watching her for reasons beyond their failed relationship, and Nico, dangerous as he might be, was at least being honest about the threat. Nico nodded to one of his men, who immediately retrieved Allison's purse from her car and returned with it within minutes. "You have a choice, Ms. Ward. I can have my men take you home with protection stationed outside, or you can come to my estate where I can personally ensure your safety." The responsible, sensible kindergarten teacher in Allison screamed to choose the first option, to maintain distance from this criminal world she'd accidentally stumbled into. But something deeper, more primitive, whispered that Nico Falcone was her best chance at survival. "My students have a field trip tomorrow that I can't miss," she said finally, surprising herself with this practical concern amidst the surreal danger. "I need to be at Brightwood Elementary by 7:30, regardless of what happens tonight." A genuine smile broke across Nico's face, transforming his severe features into something breathtaking. A dedicated teacher, rare in this city of opportunists. "My men will ensure you arrive on time, Ms. Ward, after we've sorted out this situation." The ride to Nico's estate passed in tense silence, Allison watching the familiar city transform into the exclusive Chestnut Hill neighborhood, where historic mansions sat hidden behind wrought iron gates and ancient oak trees. Her world and his were never meant to intersect. Moonlight spilled across manicured lawns as the Bentley pulled through elaborate gates bearing an ornate F and up a winding driveway to a stone mansion that looked like it belonged in another century. Guards positioned strategically around the property nodded respectfully as they passed. "Welcome to Falcone Estate," Nico said as he helped her from the car, his hand warm and steady against hers. "Few outside the family ever see beyond these gates. Consider it an exclusive education in how the other half of Philadelphia truly operates." Fear and fascination warred within Allison as she stepped across the threshold into a world of old money, dangerous power, and a man whose very presence seemed to draw her toward a life she never imagined. "Just until the danger passes," she whispered, unsure if she was reassuring herself or setting a boundary. Morning sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains as Allison blinked awake in a guest room larger than her entire apartment, the events of the previous night rushing back with startling clarity. She'd spent the night under the protection of Nico Falcone, the city's most feared Mafia boss. Her borrowed nightgown, silk and clearly expensive, whispered against her skin as she rose to find her gala dress cleaned and pressed, hanging alongside a simple but elegant outfit, clearly meant for her teaching day. Nico had thought of everything, which was both comforting and terrifying. A discreet knock preceded the entrance of a middle-aged woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Bellini, the housekeeper, carrying a breakfast tray and a warm smile that seemed at odds with her employer's dangerous reputation. "The boss said you have children waiting for you, so we must be prompt." 40 minutes later, Allison found herself in another luxury vehicle, this time a more subtle black SUV with tinted windows, being driven to Brightwood Elementary by one of Nico's men. The surreal contrast between her night in a crime lord's mansion and her approaching day of alphabet songs and finger paintings left her dizzy. "Mr. Falcone asked me to give you this," the driver said as they approached the school, passing her a sleek phone. "It's secure, untraceable. He's programmed his private number, just for emergencies," he added, with a knowing look that made Allison's cheeks flush despite herself. 20 kindergartners in matching yellow t-shirts successfully distracted Allison from her complicated predicament as she led them through the Philadelphia Zoo, counting giraffes and identifying letter sounds. Children's innocence was a powerful antidote to adult darkness. The field trip proceeded without incident until Allison noticed a man in a dark suit watching her class too intently from near the reptile house. Her heart raced until she recognized him as one of Nico's guards, maintaining a discreet distance while ensuring her protection. When the children were safely returned to their parents at day's end, Allison found the sleek black SUV waiting in the teacher's parking lot, a silent reminder that her ordinary life had been irrevocably altered by one dance with a dangerous man. She slid into the back seat with a mixture of resignation and anticipation. "The boss would like to know if you'd join him for dinner," the driver announced as they pulled away from the school, his tone suggesting this was more invitation than command. "He's arranged for some of your personal items to be brought from your apartment for your comfort." Allison should have been outraged at this invasion of privacy, this assumption of control over her movements and possessions. Instead, she found herself nodding, curious despite her better judgment about the man behind the power, the person beneath the dangerous reputation. The Falcone estate looked different in evening light, less intimidating, and more like a home, with warm lights glowing from windows and the scent of Italian cooking wafting through the air. Nico waited on the terrace, his imposing frame softened by casual attire and the golden sunset behind him. "Your students survived their wildlife encounter?" he asked, pouring her a glass of wine as she approached, his genuine interest in her mundane day surprising her. His criminal empire seemed worlds away from this moment of normal conversation. Allison accepted the wine, allowing herself to study him openly for the first time. The strength in his shoulders, the intelligence in his eyes, the way his presence seemed to fill any space he occupied. "They were more excited about the bus ride than the actual animals," she replied with a small smile. "Children find joy in what adults take for granted," Nico observed, gesturing her toward an intimate table set for two overlooking the estate's gardens. "Something I've always admired about teachers. You see that joy daily. Nurture it rather than exploit it." The unexpected depth in his observation caught Allison off guard, challenging her preconceived notions about who this man might be beyond his criminal empire. Dangerous territory, she reminded herself, finding humanity in someone society had labeled a monster. 3 days passed in a strange new rhythm for Allison. Teaching by day, returning to Nico's estate by night, learning pieces of his world while keeping her own intact. Tonight's dinner had shifted from casual to serious, when Nico placed a manila folder between their wine glasses. "Bradley wasn't just your ex. He was planted in your life 6 months ago when my organization first donated to your school's reading program," Nico explained, his expression grim as he slid photographs across the table, showing Bradley meeting with known members of a rival family. Allison's hands trembled as she examined the evidence of her unwitting role in someone else's power play, memories of her relationship reconfiguring into something sinister. "He asked so many questions about my schedule, my routine. I thought he was being attentive. The Barisi family has been trying to map my movements, my weaknesses," Nico continued, his voice hardening. "They discovered my anonymous donations to educational programs and traced them to Brightwood Elementary, to you specifically as the recipient teacher." The weight of this revelation crashed through Allison's carefully constructed boundaries between Nico's world and hers. They had never been separate at all. "Your donations funded our entire literacy corner," she whispered, remembering the books that had arrived mysteriously last fall. Nico's expression softened momentarily, pride flickering across his features. "My mother was a teacher, believed education could save children from paths like mine. I honor her memory by continuing her work, though the money comes from different sources." A knock interrupted their conversation, as Mrs. Bellini entered with a dessert tray, her cheerful demeanor belying the tension in the room. "Cannoli for the teacher. The boss said they're your favorite," she announced with a wink that made Allison wonder exactly how much Nico knew about her preferences. "I've never told you I liked cannoli," Allison observed once they were alone again, a chill running down her spine despite the room's warmth. The boundaries of privacy seemed meaningless in Nico's world of surveillance and information. Nico took a slow sip of his wine, unapologetic about his methods. "I've had you investigated thoroughly since the moment you approached me at the gala, a necessary precaution in my position. Your student's safety was my first concern." Before Allison could process her conflicted feelings about this invasion, Nico's phone buzzed with an urgency that transformed his demeanor instantly. The relaxed dinner companion vanished, replaced by the calculating crime boss, as he answered the call with terse commands. "We need to move. Now," he ordered, standing abruptly and gesturing to guards who appeared as if summoned by thought alone. "The Barisi family has made their play against my operation downtown, which means this location may be compromised." Allison found herself whisked through the mansion's rear entrance and into yet another luxury vehicle, this time with Nico himself behind the wheel, his knuckles white against the leather as they sped away from the estate. The night had shattered into dangerous fragments of reality. "I can't keep living like this," Allison said suddenly, her voice steadier than she felt as streetlights flashed rhythmically across her face. "I have 26 children depending on me for stability, for safety. I can't bring this chaos into their lives." Nico's jaw tightened as he navigated through Philadelphia's empty streets, heading toward an unknown destination. You think you have a choice now? The moment Bradley reported back who you were dancing with, your normal life ended. I'm not your enemy here, Allison. The use of her first name, intimate, deliberate, hung between them as the car slowed before an elegant high-rise in Center City, its upper floors shrouded in darkness, except for a single penthouse suite glowing with warm light. My secondary residence, Nico explained as armed men emerged from the shadows to escort them inside. The penthouse spanned the entire top floor, its minimalist luxury somehow more intimidating than the old-world opulence of Nico's estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Philadelphia spread below, like a glittering map of Nico's invisible empire. You'll stay here tonight, he stated, rather than suggested, striding toward a wall panel that revealed a hidden security system more sophisticated than anything Allison had seen outside of spy movies. The building is owned by a shell corporation. The Barisi family won't trace it easily. Dawn found Allison sleepless on Italian sheets, staring at the ceiling of yet another borrowed bedroom, her life having narrowed to schools and safe houses in the span of a week. The door opened without warning as Nico entered, his expression serious but less severe in morning light. I need to introduce you to my family today, he announced, setting a steaming cup of coffee on the nightstand exactly how she preferred it. 1 sugar, splash of cream. They need to understand you're under my protection, not a target or a liability. Allison sat up abruptly, drawing the sheet around herself despite the modest pajamas she'd been provided. Your family? You mean the crime family? The organization? She clarified, her voice rising with each word as the reality of her situation crashed over her anew. Nico's smile held no humor, only resignation as he moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back in a stance that betrayed military training. Both, Ms. Ward. In my world, there's little distinction between blood and business. You need to understand that to survive. Hours later, Allison found herself seated at a massive oak table in the private room of an unassuming Italian restaurant in South Philadelphia, surrounded by men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise the dangerous energy they exuded. Nico sat at the head, his authority absolute despite his relative youth. This is Allison Ward. Nico introduced her to the assembled inner circle with the same tone he might use to present a business acquisition. She's a kindergarten teacher caught in Barisi crossfire through no fault of her own. She has my personal protection. Understand what that means. The men studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion, but none dared question Nico's declaration openly. Only an older man with silver hair and a face lined with experience leaned forward, addressing her directly rather than Nico. My nephew rarely extends protection beyond business associates, he observed in a voice graveled by age and perhaps cigars. You must be special indeed, Ms. Ward, to merit such consideration from the head of our family. Before Allison could formulate a response to this loaded observation, a younger man with a scar across his jaw pushed away from the table with obvious displeasure. A teacher? We're at war with the Barisis and you're distracted by a schoolteacher? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Nico fixed the dissenter with a stare that made Allison grateful she wasn't its target. Careful, Paul. Questioning my judgment once can be forgiven as concern for our business. Twice becomes insubordination. Paul subsided immediately, muttering apologies while the other men shifted uncomfortably, the hierarchy re-established through Nico's quiet authority rather than raised voice or explicit threat. Allison glimpsed the true power he wielded, absolute and unchallenged. Ms. Ward's school receives funding from our legitimate business interests, Nico continued smoothly, as if the tense moment had never occurred. The Barisis targeted her to get to me. We protect our investments as always. Any further questions about my decisions? The meeting progressed to business matters that Allison tried not to understand, shipping routes, territory disputes, corrupt officials. While she studied these men who moved through shadows, most citizens never acknowledged. They were businessmen in their own way, calculating risks and rewards with precision. You should eat, the silver-haired uncle encouraged quietly while the others debated strategy, pushing bread and antipasto toward her. My nephew has been different since he met you, more like his father in the early days, before this life hardened him. 2 weeks into her unexpected immersion in Nico's world, Allison developed routines within chaos, teaching days, protected evenings at either the penthouse or estate, and increasingly personal conversations with the crime boss who had upended her existence. Today's routine shattered when she noticed an unfamiliar car idling outside Brightwood Elementary during afternoon dismissal. Get the children inside now, she instructed her teacher's aide with urgent calm, years of emergency drills lending authority to her voice as she scanned for Nico's security detail, who typically maintained discreet distance during school hours. They were nowhere to be seen. The black sedan's windows lowered enough for Allison to glimpse Bradley's face in the passenger seat, his expression no longer that of the charming man she dated, but hard with purpose, and something that looked disturbingly like triumph. Beside him sat an older man in an immaculate suit, whose calculating gaze assessed the school with predatory interest. Allison's hand tightened around the secure phone in her pocket as she herded her last students through the doors, heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The man beside Bradley could only be Anton Barisi, the rival family's patriarch, whose name Nico spoke with cold respect. "Lockdown procedure," she told the school secretary, while dialing Nico's private number, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Possible security threat in the parking lot. Follow the protocol we practiced." Nico answered on the first ring, his voice shifting from casual greeting to sharp command when she whispered Bradley's name and location. "Stay inside. Away from windows. My men are 3 minutes out. Do nothing heroic, Allison. Promise me." The school's lockdown siren wailed through the hallways as Allison ushered children away from external doors, maintaining a calm facade while terror clawed at her throat. These innocent kids had become potential collateral damage in a war they knew nothing about. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not Nico's men, but Philadelphia police responding to the school's automated alert system, forcing the Barisi car to pull away from the curb with obvious reluctance. Allison watched from a classroom window as Bradley cast one final look toward the building, his expression promising this wasn't over. Hours later, after parents had collected their frightened children and police reports had been filed, Allison found herself in Nico's study at the estate, pacing before his massive desk while he coordinated response through a series of terse phone calls. The veneer of legitimate businessman had vanished entirely, revealing the strategic criminal underneath. "They crossed a line targeting a school," Nico stated once his calls concluded, his voice dangerously controlled as he joined her by the window. "Even in our world, certain boundaries are respected. Children should remain untouched by our conflicts." Allison turned to face him, exhaustion and fear finally giving way to anger that had been building since that first night at the gala. "Your world? I never asked to be part of your world, Nico. I approached you for one dance, not to become a pawn in some territorial battle between crime families." To her surprise, Nico didn't bristle at her outburst, but instead nodded as if he'd been expecting it, perhaps even waiting for the moment her politeness would crack under the strain. "You didn't choose this, but neither did I choose to be born a Falcone, with all the expectations that carries." His unexpected vulnerability silenced her momentarily, allowing him to continue in a voice stripped of its usual authority, revealing the man beneath the Mafia boss. "I was groomed for this position since childhood. Harvard Business School was just window dressing on an education that began with my father's lessons at 10 years old." Before Allison could process this glimpse behind his carefully constructed walls, the study door burst open as Paul, the same man who had questioned Nico at the family meeting, entered without knocking, his expression wild with barely contained rage. "They hit the waterfront warehouse. 3 of our men down." Nico transformed before her eyes, warmth vanishing beneath cold calculation, as he reached for his phone. "Secure Ms. Ward in the panic room, then gather everyone in the conference room. It's time we reminded the Barises why the Falcone family has controlled the city for 3 generations." Paul's eyes narrowed as they fell on Allison, contempt evident in every line of his body. "This is because of her. They never would have found our distribution center if you weren't distracted by this civilian. Your father would never have allowed such weakness." "My father is dead, Paul, and I'm not him," Nico replied with deadly quiet, stepping between Paul and Allison with subtle but unmistakable intent. "Question my leadership again, and you'll join the ranks of former associates rather than family. Am I perfectly clear?" Guards appeared to escort Allison to the promised panic room, a luxurious but secure suite hidden behind the mansion's library. But she hesitated at the doorway, turning back to Nico with sudden clarity. "This escalation isn't just about territory, is it? It's about me." The expression that crossed Nico's face confirmed her suspicion before he could master it. Something beyond professional protection had developed between them, something the Barisi family had identified as leverage before either of them fully acknowledged it themselves. The realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The panic room's security monitor displayed Nico's study, now filled with his lieutenants planning retribution, while Allison watched from her gilded cage, torn between horror at the violence being orchestrated and a growing understanding of the impossible position Nico occupied. Her simple life had vanished the moment she'd whispered, "Could you dance with me now? My ex is watching." Mrs. Bellini appeared with a tray of food and a sympathetic smile that suggested she'd witnessed this scenario before. Innocent women caught in the crossfire of Falcone family business. "The boss has arranged for your school to remain closed tomorrow, with full pay for all staff due to building maintenance issues," she explained, setting down tea exactly as Allison preferred. "How long have you worked for the Falcones?" Allison asked, seeking understanding from someone who straddled both worlds, as she now found herself doing. "How do you reconcile all of this with normal life?" The older woman's eyes crinkled with wisdom earned through decades of service. "I was 16 when I started working for Nico's grandfather, a refugee with nowhere else to go. The Falcones protected my family when the law wouldn't, gave us citizenship when the government wouldn't." Her perspective challenged Allison's black and white understanding of right and wrong, introducing shades of gray she'd never considered during her sheltered upbringing. "They've done terrible things," Allison whispered, needing to voice the truth that hung between them. "Yes, Mrs. Bellini agreed without hesitation, straightening linens with practiced efficiency. "And wonderful things, too. Funded hospitals, protected neighborhoods from worse predators, ensured children like yours have books when the city cuts education budgets. The world isn't simple, Kara." Hours later, Nico entered the panic room alone, his expression haunted in ways Allison hadn't seen before, vulnerability evident in the loosened tie and uncharacteristically disheveled hair. He looked younger somehow, burdened by decisions no 30-year-old should face. "The Barises have proposed a meeting. Neutral ground, traditional rules," he announced, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey, without offering explanation for the tension radiating from his powerful frame. "They're asking for concessions I can't make." Allison set aside her book, studying the complex man before her, criminal and protector, ruthless and principled in his own way. "What do they want that you can't give them?" she asked, though part of her feared she already knew the answer. Nico's laugh held no humor as he drained his glass in one swallow. "Officially, territory along the river, control of 2 distribution channels, and immunity for Bradley's betrayal. Unofficially, they want to expose my weakness, you, and force me to choose between family legacy and personal desire." The word desire hung between them, acknowledging the unspoken attraction that had grown despite the danger, or perhaps because of it. Allison stood, moving toward him with newfound clarity about her own complicated feelings for this man who lived by codes she couldn't fully comprehend. "I won't be used as leverage against you," she said with quiet determination, close enough now to see the faint stubble on his jaw, the weariness around his eyes. "There must be another option beyond surrender or all-out war." Nico's expression shifted to something resembling hope as he studied her face, perhaps seeing beyond the kindergarten teacher to the woman capable of strategic thinking under pressure. "What exactly are you suggesting, Allison?" he asked, using her first name with deliberate intimacy. "A third path," she replied, surprising herself with the clarity of the plan forming in her mind. "Bradley's their connection to me, their inside man. What if we use that, fed him false information, set a trap rather than walking into one?" Nico's silver-haired uncle, introduced properly now as Salvatore Falcone, listened attentively as Allison outlined her strategy the following morning, his weathered face revealing nothing until she finished speaking. The 4 of them, Allison, Nico, Uncle Salvatore, and a reluctant Paul, sat in the estate's secure conference room planning counterintelligence rather than bloodshed. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Allison would return to her apartment under the pretense of a falling out with Nico, appearing vulnerable while actually being surrounded by Falcone security. Bradley would inevitably approach her with false sympathy, attempting to extract information about Falcone operations while feeding her Baresi lies. "The Baresis won't believe I've simply let you go," Nico argued, pacing the conference room with predatory intensity that betrayed his concern. "They've been watching us for weeks. They know there's more between us than professional obligation." Uncle Salvatore's knowing glance between them confirmed that their growing attachment hadn't gone unnoticed even within the family. "The lady has courage, nephew. Perhaps more than some of your men," he observed pointedly, silencing Paul's beginning objection with a sharp look. The plan proceeded with military precision. Allison returned to teaching with doubled security, resumed residence at her apartment, and waited for Bradley's inevitable approach. It came 3 days later as she loaded groceries into her car, his practiced smile failing to mask the calculation in his eyes. A burner phone provided by Nico remained hidden in Allison's purse, its single-programmed number a direct line to the tactical team stationed in unmarked vehicles throughout her neighborhood. She'd memorized the extraction protocols, safe words, and emergency signals during intensive training sessions at the estate that revealed a previously untapped talent for operational thinking. The weight of the wire beneath her blouse felt foreign against her skin, a constant reminder of the dangerous game she'd volunteered to play against men who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her if they discovered her deception. Yet fear had given way to resolute determination. These people had threatened her students, manipulated her life, and now she had the power to end their scheme. "Ali, thank God you're okay," Bradley exclaimed, embracing her before she could object, his cologne no longer appealing, but cloying in its artifice. "I've been so worried since I saw you with Falcone. You have no idea how dangerous he is." Allison allowed her genuine anger to fuel her performance, pulling away with convincing distress. "I made a terrible mistake getting involved with him. The things I saw, Brad, the things he's planning, I just want my normal life back," she replied, voice breaking on cue. Bradley's expression shifted subtly, predatory interest poorly disguised as concern as he helped load her remaining groceries. "You know you can trust me, right? Maybe there's a way I can help you stay safe from him, especially if you know something that could neutralize the threat he poses." The coded language confirmed everything Nico had warned about Bradley's true intentions, but Allison merely bit her lip and glanced nervously around the parking lot, as if fearing surveillance. "I can't talk here. Could you come up for coffee? I've missed having someone normal to talk to." Hours later, Allison sat in Nico's secure study once more, recounting every detail of Bradley's visit, while technicians verified the listening devices she'd allowed him to plant in her apartment. "He's coming back tomorrow night. Says he has people who can help me escape Nico's influence." "You've performed brilliantly," Nico praised, his professional admiration transparent, though the underlying personal sentiment remained carefully controlled. "Tomorrow we'll have everything in place to track him directly to Barisi, with evidence of their conspiracy against both of us." The following evening unfolded according to plan until it suddenly didn't. Bradley arrived with unexpected backup, 3 men whose concealed weapons bulged beneath their jackets. Allison maintained her composure despite the escalation, playing her role while trusting in the Falcone surveillance team monitoring every word through her hidden wire. "These gentlemen work for someone who's very interested in helping you, Allison," Bradley explained with false reassurance as the men positioned themselves strategically around her small living room. "But first, they need specifics about Falcone's shipment schedule, the one you mentioned seeing on his desk." Allison provided the falsified information exactly as rehearsed, watching Bradley record it on his phone with poorly concealed eagerness. "Will this be enough to keep me safe from him?" she asked, injecting her voice with calculated vulnerability that appealed to his ego. The lead gunman's phone buzzed with an incoming call, his expression darkening as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Change of plans," he announced, his previous pretense of helping Allison vanishing as he drew his weapon. "The boss wants her brought in for direct questioning." The moment the gun appeared, Nico's team burst through doors and windows in synchronized precision, neutralizing the threat before Allison could even process her rapidly escalating danger. The operation concluded in seconds, Bradley and his companions disarmed and restrained, while Nico himself entered her apartment, with barely controlled fury etched across his features. "You weren't supposed to come yourself," Allison whispered as he crossed to her, checking her for injuries with gentle hands that belied the violence he'd just orchestrated. "The plan was for you to remain at the command center, not expose yourself to risk." 3 months after the failed Barisi kidnapping attempt, Philadelphia's criminal landscape had been permanently altered. Anton Barisi had fled to Italy following federal investigations triggered by anonymous tips. Bradley faced multiple conspiracy charges without bail, and Nico Falcone had accelerated his family's transition toward legitimate business interests with unprecedented determination. "The kindergarten expansion project breaks ground next week," Nico announced, sliding architectural plans across his desk toward Allison as sunshine streamed through the estate's library windows. "The Falcone Educational Foundation's first official project, with you as program director if you're interested." Allison studied the blueprints with mixed emotions. The new facility would serve hundreds of underprivileged children with cutting-edge resources, yet its funding still originated from Nico's complicated empire that straddled both worlds. "This is incredible. But I need to know the money is clean, Nico." Entirely legitimate. Our technology investments and real estate holdings generate more than enough legal income to fund the foundation, he assured her, moving around the desk to stand beside her chair. Uncle Salvatore has surprisingly progressive ideas about corporate social responsibility for a man of his generation. The silver-haired consigliere had become an unexpected ally in Nico's gradual reformation of family business practices, recognizing that longevity in modern America required adaptation rather than adherence to old-world methods. His approval of Allison had silenced even Paul's lingering objections. "My father built an empire through fear," Nico explained, gazing out at the estate grounds where spring flowers had begun to bloom. "I intend to transform it through education, opportunity, and strategic philanthropy, creating loyalty through positive impact rather than intimidation." Allison recognized the significance of his evolving vision, not an overnight conversion to sainthood, but a pragmatic evolution guided partially by his growing feelings for a kindergarten teacher who'd stumbled into his world by chance. "Your mother would be proud of this legacy," she offered softly. The Falcone family's quarterly donations to Brightwood Elementary had transformed into a comprehensive educational initiative spanning Philadelphia's most underserved districts. With carefully vetted staff, unaware their generous benefactor once controlled the city's most feared criminal organization. Children who might have been recruited into gang life now found pathways to legitimate opportunities through scholarships, mentorship programs, and community resources. Weekly dinners with Uncle Salvatore had become Allison's unexpected window into Nico's childhood. Stories of a serious boy who excelled at chess, protected neighborhood kids from bullies, and read voraciously despite his father's insistence that education was secondary to street lessons. These glimpses into the person Nico might have become under different circumstances strengthened her resolve to support his redemptive journey without naivete about the complexity of truly transforming a criminal empire. "She would have adored you," Nico replied with rare emotional openness, the carefully maintained walls between them continuing to crumble despite the complications their relationship faced. "A teacher who stands her ground against Mafia lords and creates tactical counterintelligence operations between lesson plans." Philadelphia's spring gala arrived once more, exactly 1 year after their fateful first dance, though this time Allison entered on Nico's arm rather than seeking him out in desperate anonymity. The crowd parted instinctively before them, whispers following in their wake, the notorious Falcone with his unlikely partner. Bradley's replacement as Anton Barisi's lieutenant watched from across the ballroom, hatred barely concealed behind his champagne glass, as Nico led Allison toward the dance floor with possessive confidence. The war between families had reached uneasy detente rather than resolution, despite Nico's significant victory months earlier. "He's watching us," Allison murmured, as Nico's hand settled at the small of her back, the gesture now familiar rather than intimidating. "Should we be concerned about another attempt tonight?" Nico's smile held genuine amusement as he guided her through the opening steps of the waltz, their movements perfectly synchronized after months of private practice in the estate's ballroom. "Let him watch. The rules have changed. They know targeting you means total war, not negotiation." The orchestra's music swelled around them as they moved across the floor. Allison's emerald gown, a deliberate echo of their first meeting, shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, voicing the question that occasionally haunted her quiet moments. "Getting involved with a kindergarten teacher who complicated your already dangerous life?" "Not for a moment," Nico replied without hesitation, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that still made her breath catch. "You showed me a different kind of strength, a different path forward for the family legacy. Some complications are worth every risk." As the music reached its crescendo, Nico spun her expertly before drawing her closer than propriety strictly allowed, just as he had 1 year ago when she was a stranger seeking momentary refuge. "Could you dance with me forever?" he whispered against her ear, the question loaded with implications beyond this single evening. Allison studied his face, the features that had once seemed severe now beloved in their complexity, the man behind the reputation now known in both his darkness and his capacity for change. "Yes," she answered simply, accepting both the dance and everything that came with loving Niccolo Falcone. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is important for me to continue creating content here.